Hey, this is Digital by Computing. Today we're going to look at how to speed up your Mac running macOS High Sierra. So High Sierra has been out now for a little while and you may find that your Mac is running a little bit sluggish. So I've got some tips for you on how to speed up your Mac. Some of these may work, some of these may not work. It really depends on the circumstance of your Mac and how slow it may be performing. So let's look at these steps right now. So here we are on our Mac, we are running High Sierra. So what I start off with is applications that you no longer need should be removed. They are taking up space on your Mac. So removing these apps is the best thing that you can do. So you've obviously got a bunch of apps down here in your dock, but all of your applications live inside your Finder and inside the applications folder. So in here you've got all of the apps that you've got on your Mac. Go through these applications, and if you don't need them, remove them. You don't need to keep every single application in here. So I can see straight away, well, look, I don't need this, so I'm going to trash it. It's going to ask me to put in my passcode or my finger, depending on if you've got the Touch ID on your Mac or not. Let's look through something else. Here's another one that I no longer need. All right, so that is the first thing that I would start to do. Now that is removing the application from your Mac generally in the easiest way. There are some instances where apps may still have traces of files sitting in other locations. We're not going to cover through that today, but just keep in mind removing applications is always a good place to start. Similar to removing applications, you want to remove files that you no longer need. The more files you have on your Mac, generally, the slower your Mac will go. Now, this isn't always the case. On newer models of Macs that have SSD or flash disks, it generally doesn't make too much of a difference the more data you have or the less data you have. But on other computers that have drives that have got physical moving parts, which most Macs may have, removing files is a good thing to do. The less files you've got, the less junk you have. Generally, it will improve the speed of your Mac in most scenarios. Now, the other good thing is also removing applications, removing files. You can go from your Finder, you can go through your desktop, you can go through documents that you no longer need. If you've got things in your movies and music and pictures, go through all these folders and remove stuff. Not only will it, not only will it increase the speed of your Mac in some instances, but it also is just a good housekeeping of your Mac in general. So it's always good to try to keep your Mac relatively clean. Otherwise, you're just going to accumulate junk over time. Run a first aid or a disk utility on your Mac. So what am I talking about here? If you go into your Spotlight search and you look for disk utility, just type in disk and it should come up. You've got disk utility. Now this looks slightly different in the new versions of High Sierra. And you'll also find that it has formatted your drive slightly different. There's this new file format called APFS. Not that you need to know that, but just keep that in mind. And doing a first aid on your hard drive generally will scan your drive, scan your disks, and remove junk files. It'll clean up configuration, partitioning issues, those sort of things that may be accumulated on your Mac over time. So I can just simply select my hard drive here. Click on First Aid. It's going to ask me if I want to run First Aid on my Mac, and I will say Run. You may get a warning that it says First Aid needs to temporarily lock the boot volume. That's because it needs to essentially lock some files to exclusively run on First Aid. So other applications may run slow or may become unresponsive while your First Aid is running. First Aid will finish, and hopefully if everything has worked correctly, you'll have a nice green tick. You can look through the details if you want to actually see exactly what it did. If you've got a cross, you may have bigger issues that may require some further first aid on your hard drive. There are third-party applications that can do this also, but your disk utility is one of those great tools that is built into your Mac by default for running and checking first aid related issues on your Mac. Clear your login items from your Mac. So when your Mac starts up, there's a whole bunch of applications that start up in the background that you may not even be aware of. So for example, you see here on my top bar, on my top of my screen here, I've got some applications that are running. So I've got Dropbox, I've got this VPN thing that I've got, and there's a few others. Now, these things all start up automatically when your Mac starts up, and they are executed from the login items on your computer. So to access this area, you need to go into System Preferences down the bottom. I've got System Preferences. Otherwise, you can go into the Apple logo and into System Preferences. And from within here, you want to go into Users and Groups. Select your current user. If you have more than one user, select each one individually, as each one may have different login items depending on the login user. Select Login Items here on the top right area. And here you'll have a list of all of these applications. So these items will open automatically when you log in. And literally all you have to do is select the item that you don't want to start when your computer starts and click on Remove. Obviously, remove things that you are certain you don't want to start when your Mac starts, okay? This is not removing the application itself, all right? The application still stays on your computer. It's just that it won't start up automatically when your Mac starts. So I don't want, for example, iTunes Helper. I don't want my calendar. I don't want System Preferences. I don't want Fit Connector. But I do want Dropbox to be running when my Mac starts, right? Otherwise, it's going to stop syncing, for example. So have applications in here that you want to start up. If you don't want them to start up, remove them from here. You can easily add them back by clicking on the plus logo and adding them back at a later stage. It's always good practice to clear out your recycling bin fairly regularly. So we discussed removing applications and removing files from your Mac, but then you've got your trash that's just sometimes sitting here and it's just taking up space on your hard drive unnecessarily. It's always not a good recommendation to store things in here. I know a lot of people who actually store documents in their trash or in the recycle bin. Don't do that. It's trash, right? So if it's in there, it should be removed. To remove it, you literally right click on the trash and say empty trash. If your browser is running slow, it could require your history and your cache and cache removed on your browser itself. So in my scenario, I've got Safari and Firefox. You may also have other ones such as Chrome. And accumulating, as you're surfing websites, you're accumulating history and information from these websites that are stored, so that when you need to access them again, it can be a little bit faster. But that does take up space and can generally make your browser sometimes run slower. So removing these items is a good thing. We're going to show you how to do it in Safari, but the process is similar across other browsers. So I'm going to open up Safari, which I've just got here running on my dock. I'm presented with my standard Safari page, and I can go into a particular website. And to clear out my history, I go into Safari, Clear History. So this will remove all the history on my Mac. I can actually set this up so that it does it automatically also, so that I don't have to worry about doing this. To do that, go into the Preferences inside Safari. In your General tab, you want to go into Remove History Items, and it actually can have an option there around how often you want to remove your history automated. 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 1 year. You can actually go manually as well, and then it'll never ask you. All right. So I like to just have it for 1 year. That's just me, but you can actually set it so that it's 1 day, so that every day your history will automatically be removed. Another good thing that you can do is remove some other saved information from your browser every so often. Go into the privacy area, go into manage website data. So this is cookies and website data. Select website, manage website data. And you'll have a list here of a whole bunch of information. This is all websites that you have gone through. These websites have stored data that can be used to track your browsing. Remove this data may reduce tracking, but may also log out of websites or change website behavior. So keep in mind that when you do remove these, you may lose particular saved items on those particular websites. But literally, it's just selecting remove all, and that'll clear out your entire list, or you can select one at a time and select remove. A handy tool that I like to use is called the Activity Monitor. This is an application that is loaded by default on your Mac, and you can search for it again by going into your Spotlight and looking up activity. You'll see Activity Monitor shows up, and then this tool opens up. Activity Monitor essentially is the tool that you can see all of the activity that is taking place on your Mac currently, around how much CPU is being used, around how much memory is being used, energy, how much disk, and your network performance. You can actually sort this by your CPU. You can actually see here all of the things that are running. There's a whole bunch of applications and processes and everything that are running in the background. And I can sort it by, say, CPU percentage. At the very top, you'll see that QuickTime Player is at the highest. That is because I'm recording this video, but you may see other applications in here. This will give you a good indication of what applications maybe are consuming the most CPU and the most memory and energy and disk space, etc. on your Mac. This is a great tool to try to identify potential problem applications that may be utilizing far too much of your data, all right, far too much of your resources on your Mac. There could be applications in here that you didn't even know were using this much data, so you may want to opt and remove them, okay? Now be very, very mindful of what you're doing in here, okay? You can go ahead and stop the process by clicking this little cross. This will force the process to quit, but if you remove the wrong thing, then you could have problems. So only remove things that you know what they are. So I've got Activity Monitor, which is this here, QuickTime, which is running, Dropbox, for example, I've got my dock down the very bottom. So I can literally select one particular item, select that and click on the cross, and that'll close Activity Monitor. You'll see that there's a lot of other areas in here, and you can see how much RAM it is actually using. So this is a great tool that you can use. You can actually also see how much disk usage each application is using. So you can exactly see what apps are taking up the most space on your Mac. So not only use this to go ahead and close applications that are maybe using too much, but use this tool to really diagnose all of the apps and all of the processes that are running on your Mac that are consuming too much resources or using up too much of your disk. Clearing out your cache or your cache. I will warn you before we commence, be very, very careful when you are removing your cache, because removing some things that you may not know could cause problems around applications that you may have that require particular saved information. So just be very, very mindful when you are removing any cache or cache from your Mac. So two things that you can do. You need to locate the library folder, which you can do through the Finder by going into Go to folder, or you can open up the terminal. We're going to cover both of those very, very briefly, but essentially on the newer version of High Sierra, the library folders are hidden, right? The content is not visible to the end user. Apple has removed that functionality more just as a security concern around users maybe removing things in there that they don't know what they are. So it's really just more a precautional thing. So from within here, you go into Go to folder, and there are two areas that we want to look up to delete files. There are you've got your user folder, so your particular user folder. If your name is John Smith, you've got your John Smith folder /library. You can access that by doing the little tilde /library / and that will open up that folder. Or you can just look up straight /library / and say go. And you'll find that already that is empty. It's not actually empty. There is files in there, but they are hidden by Apple. Your other one around your user folder will look something like this. You locate your caches or caches folder, right? You'll see all of your files are in here. And then you literally select the files that you want to delete, the folders that you want to delete, and click on your trash. If you want to delete them all, you select them all by doing Command A and click on your trash. In some scenarios, some files may have this particular folder locked. So after you have trashed them, you find that you may not be able to empty your trash because your Mac will require a restart. So you require a restart before it gets fully, before your cache or your cache is fully deleted. I personally like to do a lot of this through the terminal because it's a little bit more cleaner and remove some of the issues around, having to put in a password here, having to do this there, and, especially around the, this particular area here being empty. So keep that in mind. All right. So do it through the Finder, or you can do it through terminal. You can access terminal from, I've got it in my dock, but you can generally access it by going into the spotlight area and typing in terminal, or through your Finder Applications Utilities folder. It's located in there also. I've opened this up. You'll see that by default, it's gone to my home drive. Okay, so my Aguero Mac, which is the name of my Mac, Emilio is the name of my home drive, and I can just do an ls to list all of the directories, and you'll see straight in here I've got library. All right, I can change directory to library, ls to see the contents, and then in here you'll see the folder that we need. Change directory. And then here you'll see all of the folders and files that are residing inside your caches folder. From within this area, you literally just do some simple commands around remove. You can do an RM, capital R, and then the name of the particular folder. Let's say comapple.tour. And just do tab to automatically resolve that for you. Enter, and that will remove that particular file. Okay, you can then do other files as well. All right, so you can literally go through this area, find the folders, the cache or cache folders that you no longer need, select them and delete them from here. The other area is from the very root of your Mac. Okay, so you've got this little / here, ls. You're now at the very bottom area. So before we were within users and then inside of your user drive, your home drive. But from within here, you'll also see that I've got library listed. Change directory, library, tab, enter, ls. This is the contents of that library, and you'll see that there's another caches folder. And these are the files within here. Similarly, you do an RM, /R, to force a directory to be deleted. All right, select that, throw it in there and delete. You may need to reboot your Mac, as I said, but again, be very, very mindful when you are deleting your cache or your cache from your Mac, as it will remove configuration and save settings potentially from your Mac. Another thing that you can do is if your Mac is having trouble, if this is more for if your Mac is having problems around maybe having some glitches, but is also has been helpful around performance, is to clear the NVRAM of your Mac. I'm not going to go ahead and show you how to do this right here, but I do have descriptions in the bottom of this video showing you how to do it. Essentially locates, it's around you shutting down your Mac and then locating the command keys and a couple of other keys on your keyboard, starting up your Mac and holding these keys, the command option, P and R keys, until you hear the particular chime, and then it'll go and clear this NVRAM in the background. So details on how to do that are in the bottom in the description. So if you've tried those steps and you're still having trouble, you can go to third-party applications. There is some great third-party apps that you can use. One of my favorites is CleanMyMac. So CleanMyMac is an app that you can access via the link that I've got in my description there, cleanmacdownload.com/Emilio. I've just got a link directly there to go ahead and get this application. And essentially it's going to do a thorough cleanup of your Mac and do a scan of your entire Mac and ask you to go and remove some files if you don't need them. This is what the interface looks like. And literally it's just clicking on the scan button here. It'll scan your entire Mac, including your system junk, photos junk, your mail, iTunes, trash, large files, etc. You can also use the uninstaller feature, which lets you remove the application and all of the associated files. Remember that we spoke about earlier that when you delete it straight from applications, there could be some files that are sitting there in other locations. This will go and find all of this. And there's a few other things in here. You'll find that there's a lot of things that are found when you do run CleanMyMac. It is a great application, one that I use very regularly, because those other steps that we've covered don't go into things such as your photos junk, your mail junk, your iTunes junk, etc. While this application will go in and sweep your entire Mac and then select, it'll give you essentially a big summary of what to delete and then you go ahead and delete those things that you don't need. So great app, highly recommend it. You can click on that link, as I said below, to go ahead and get that application. Now, if after that you're still having trouble, you may look at increasing the RAM of your computer. You may not have sufficient RAM on your computer. So when you perhaps purchased your Mac, you only got 8 gig of RAM, and then you're finding that you may need some more. You know, we covered the activity monitor before. Looking through the activity monitor and looking under the memory area will give you a good indication of how much of your RAM is currently being used and how much physical RAM you've got. So you'll see currently I've got 16 gig of RAM and I'm using just under half of that. Now this Mac is sitting pretty idle. It's not using too much resources right now, but when you are using it pretty heavily, those steps, those stats on the memory would go up. So if you're seeing that you're hitting close to your physical memory, you may require some more RAM on your computer. Now, some Macs may not be able to upgrade additional RAM because you may not have additional slots, or you may need to remove the RAM that's in there if there's smaller capacities and get new RAM in there. The easiest thing you can do is take your Mac to a local Apple store and let them know that you're interested in getting some more memory from your computer. They will then analyze your computer and tell you whether your Mac can have additional RAM, and then they should be able to quote you a price to get additional RAM if you can do that. But additional RAM is a big benefit to speeding up your Mac. Sometimes it's not always the best to upgrade to the latest operating system. If you're running an older Mac and then you've upgraded to High Sierra, and after all of these steps that we've gone through, all of these things that we've covered, your Mac is still running very poorly, it could be because your Mac is essentially running the end of its life and may not be able to run the latest operating system, High Sierra, quite well. So in some scenarios, I would suggest to downgrade to the older version of macOS. If your Mac was running okay on Sierra and now it's running poorly on High Sierra, chances are fairly good that High Sierra, obviously requiring more resources, but your Mac can't handle that. So perhaps look at downgrading back to an earlier version of macOS. And my last one is, even after all of that, if you still want to be running High Sierra, you don't want to downgrade, and you've tried all of these steps and it's still running very poorly, then look, there's not really much more that we can do. The next step really is to maybe look at investing in a newer, faster Mac. The Macs will run their end of life. They only do have maybe a 3 to 5 year, generally 3 to 5 year, life, especially if you're wanting to run the latest software. Technology is changing very quickly. Software continues to require more and more resources. So the newer operating systems will require more and more resources. So just keep that in mind. You may be at a point where you have to replace your Mac. So that is my summary. I would love it if you commented below. Let me know your thoughts around this. Let me know if you found these tips helpful. I know these tips are always helpful for myself, and I always put them into practice and into place. And I know that many of you also find these helpful. So please comment below. It helps me to also grow my channel and lets me know whether you guys are happy with the sort of content that you are receiving. So if you found that video helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel, Digital by Computing, just on the button there for more videos.